The Grey Wastes of Hades, the neutral evil plane in the Great Wheel cosmology of Dungeons & Dragons. They say this is the most evil of the lower planes, since it is not tainted by the impulsive destruction of chaos or the organized codes of law. This is a place of pure evil. Quote, I suppose I could tell you about the waste, but what'd be the point? It's not going to change with the knowledge, and it's sure not going to feel anything you do to it. What, you just wanted to come here and see the place for yourself? Well, alright, for all the good it's going to do you. I was like you once, bright-eyed, full of dreams, and ready to take on the multiverse. All that changed when I'd seen the truth behind this place. See, the waste takes your dreams and perverts them. It grants your deepest wishes and then takes them away. For the first few days that you're here, you have incredibly vivid dreams, and your imagination runs rampant. It goes faster and faster, until you realize that you're running out of ideas, until you realize that this place has sucked everything from you. There's precious little that'll keep you from ending it all then, unless you can hold on to a scrap from your past and nurture it till it becomes a hope for the future. You just fade away into nothingness. Yeah, some places here might interest you, but unless you've got the spiritual equivalent of the strength of a titan, you won't be interested in them by the time you get there. What's the point? You're going to go ahead and do it anyway, no matter what I tell you. Powers know that I've tried. There's just no use in trying to stop you. No use in doing anything. Anything at all. End quote. So, let's talk about what Hades is really like. First, let me preface this by saying that normally I would go through how the plane was described differently in each edition of D&D. However, with Hades, there's not really any differences in what it's like between them. First, third, and fifth edition only have a few paragraphs of info, whereas second edition has like 20 pages of lore on Hades, so most of the info I'm going to give you is from 2e. However, nothing stated in first, third, or fifth really contradicts anything from 2e. The biggest difference is that in 4th edition, Hades just doesn't exist. See, 4th edition uses the world axis cosmology instead of the Great Wheel, so instead of 17 outer planes, all neatly organized based on alignment and sort of having geographical relations to one another, in 4th edition, all of the outer planes just float in the astral sea as astral dominions. Some of the planes are the same, such as the 9 hells, however, a lot of them were split apart, so instead of a divine realm existing within a layer within a plane, it's just the divine realm or just the layer by itself, whereas the rest of the plane either doesn't exist or is somewhere else. This is the case with Hades, where the third layer of Pluton exists, however it is significantly retconned, and then the rest of the plane I could find no references to in 4th edition. But let's move on to the description. Being in the middle of the lower planes, here is where all the evil coalesces into one plane of pure, undiluted evil. This is where evil is at its worst. What exactly is pure evil? It is apathy, hopelessness, and despair. It lacks emotion, joy, peace, or hope. Hades slowly kills any dreams, aspirations, and desires, leaving beings as withered husks of their former selves. It is a gray land with a gray sky, and lacks a moon, sun, and stars, and experiences no passing seasons. Everything here is in a state of eternal waiting. A twilight without the sense of closure that dusk brings or the promise of a new day at dawn. In Hades, everything is a shade of gray, ranging from charcoal to almost white. There are no celestial bodies, but it does cycle between slight brightening and darkening with no discernible pattern. It might brighten for hours on end or just a few minutes before darkening again. This constant state of indeterminacy further perpetuates the feeling of eternal waiting and drives anyone within to the brink of despair. The pervasive evil acts as a powerful spiritual force that drags all creatures down, including the gods that dwell here, seeping apathy and despair into everything. Over time, visitors to Hades give up on what used to matter, succumbing to total ennui. The more time one spends in Hades, the more they become devoid of feeling, doing nothing but despairing in this spiritual grayness. Since it is in the middle of the 9 hells and the abyss, its first layer, Oinos, is the primary battlefield of the Blood War. Hades is comprised of 3 layers, called glooms. The glooms of Hades are Oinos, a land of disease, Niflheim, a misty pine forest, and Pluton, a grove of dying trees and home to the most powerful god in Hades, the Olympian god of death of the same name. Properties. Anyone who stays here begins to succumb to the defeatism and sadness that infects this plane. You lose hope, emotions, and even colors. When it comes to the game mechanics, all editions do this a little differently, but they all keep this theme of pervasive apathy. In first edition, colors slowly fade, so that vibrant colors are muted after a week and completely gray after 2 weeks. Travelers that stay longer than 2 weeks must successfully save versus spell or be permanently trapped in Hades, their existence fading over the next month until they become larvae. They can be rescued by another pulling them out of Hades or by a wish spell. In second edition had Planescape, so there's a lot of info here. So when it comes to color, all possessions of those who come here lose their color over the course of a week. Even dark black is an exception here, so bright colors are like looking into the sun to the inhabitants of this plane. Newer residents who are still capable of caring will attack anyone wearing these painful colors, beating them, tearing off their bright clothes, and burying them. They try not to make them bleed, for even the dull red, or whatever color blood that creature has, hurts their eyes. To travel anywhere within the Grey Waste outside of God's realm, you must not concentrate on your destination. Only the lack of desire or care to reach a place allows you to make much progress. If you are not intent on reaching your destination, you move 10 times faster. Teleportation into or around Hades is difficult. It straight up doesn't work on the first Gloom Oinos, and has a 75% chance of failure on the other 2 Glooms. There are 3 possible explanations as to why Hades limits teleportation. Either the similar nature of different regions of Hades confuses the spell, since it all looks alike, even to magic. It could be a condition imposed to limit the movement of fiendish troops to the main battlefields of the Blood War, or something on the plane itself dislikes the freedom of movement. Since it takes a while for the apathetic influence of Hades to kick in for visitors, if people could just pop in and out easily, the plane would never be able to claim souls. Apathy. The plane steals dreams and hopes from people, draining all that they ever wish to be. Every week someone spends in Hades, they must succeed a save versus spell or begin to lose their sense of self. Quote, "This comes in the form of dreams so incredibly vivid that you can smell and taste them. They bring up your past, taking memories and desires and spilling them onto the ground of the Grey Waste. They find this enjoyable at first, until the dreams die down in intensity. As they do, their imagination and willpower dissipate, and they find themselves wondering why they ever dreamed in the first place. Once someone has succumbed and lost all dreams, they no longer desire to leave the waste. Within 1d6 months, they lose sight of their own identity and vanish into the uncharted regions of the plane to shed their mortal guise, transforming into a soul larva. Fiends seem to be immune to this process." End quote. Magic in Hades also works quite differently. So first off, spells always have the most evil effect possible, and if you don't pay close attention to what you're doing, you might end up injuring your comrades or drawing hostile attention to yourself. Since everything is shades of gray in Hades, color-based spells don't work here. So spells such as Color Spray, Prismatic Sphere, or Prismatic Wall is what it's called in 5th edition, Hypnotic Pattern, etc. just will not work here. When it comes to conjuration magic, summoning spells usually call on a skirmishing warrior in Oinos. They are usually annoyed at being dragged away from their war and only act according to the letter of the binding, making a note of the summoner so that they can deal with that nuisance later. A summoning spell can summon anything, regardless of the caster's level, so even a monster summoning 1 could net a pit fiend. Divination spells reveal little on the Grey Waste. The messages are always tinged with despair and promise a sad end to whatever question was posed. The plane cannot differentiate between truth and lie, so divinations can be false. The spells are twisted in order to specifically respond to the caster's psyche, netting very different results upon each casting. Divination is essentially useless in Hades since it cannot be relied upon. Enchantment magic. The plane lacks charm, and the people here don't have any dreams or ambitions to anchor them to life. Because of this, they gain a +3 bonus to saves against charms, and if a charm normally wouldn't allow a save, they get one instead, without the bonus of course. When someone is charmed, it snaps them out of the plane's influence, giving them something to hope for again for the duration of the spell. This only happens if they've been under the waste influence for less than 2 weeks. When the charm ends, they are mad at the manipulation, and this anger keeps them from the plane's influence of hopelessness for another week. However, once this ends, they fall further into despair and automatically fail their next save against the waste spiritual numbing. To make up for the fact that charms are near useless, enchantments work better here. Spells on objects are enhanced by 25%, with longer durations and greater area of effects, but only if the enchantment could be used for an evil purpose. Otherwise, it fails outright. Now, if you're like me and are really only familiar with 5th edition spells, this confused me at first, but basically the enchantment school of magic in 2nd edition was not only enchanting people's minds and charming them, but it was also literally enchanting items. So enchant magic item and magic weapon were considered enchantment spells. Although I don't know how many of those spells in 2nd edition there were, so I don't know how useful this is, but spells used on objects were enhanced, assuming it was to be used for an evil purpose. Necromancy. You cannot raise mindless undead, so even low-level necromancers would be capable of summoning ghouls, as opposed to zombies or skeletons. All undead here are free-willed though, so they won't listen to you, and are evil-aligned. Necromancy spells used for good purposes, such as healing or resurrection, always fail unless cast by a power or a proxy. Elemental. Summoned elementals are free and might choose to attack the conjurer, serve him, or wander aimlessly. Summoned pseudo-elementals are always evil-aligned. Spell keys in Hades are different for each layer and all relate, at least in some small sense, to their school. So, for example, a key for Charmed Person on Oinos is a small mirror the caster must use to reflect the light from their eyes. The necromantic key for Pluton is a stone plucked from the mouth of a petitioner. Power keys are seldom given out by the powers of Hades. When everything will end in gloom and despair anyways, what's the point? However, most powers do cooperate with other allied gods in their pantheon, so they will grant them to fellow followers. Most of these are specific to the sphere of spells that is the asking god specialty. So, for example, a cleric of the Greek pantheon might find a key to restore his healing sphere to full power in Pluton, simply because Hades remains on good terms with the Greek powers on Arborea. In 3rd edition, Hades had the strongly evil-aligned trait. Non-evil characters in Hades suffered a -2 penalty on all charisma, wisdom, and intelligence-based checks. It also had the entrapping trait. Quote, a non-outsider in Hades experiences increasing apathy and despair while there. Colors become grayer and less vivid, sounds duller, and even the demeanor of companions seems to be more hateful. At the conclusion of every week spent in Hades, any non-outsider must make a will saving throw, DC 10 plus the number of consecutive weeks spent in Hades. Failure indicates that the individual has fallen entirely under the control of the plane, becoming a petitioner of Hades. Travelers entrapped by the inherent evil of Hades cannot leave the plane of their own volition and have no desire to do so. Memories of any previous life fade into nothingness, and it takes a wish or miracle spell to return such characters to normal. End quote. The hateful nature of the plane makes creatures less likely to flee in combat, so most fights here are to the death. There was also something called the Graze in 3rd edition, which was a spiritual poison. Every 24 hours spent on Hades, they must make a DC 13 will save, unless they have spell resistance 10 or higher. On a failure, they take 1 point of temporary wisdom damage, down to a minimum of 1 wisdom, which cannot be healed until they leave Hades. In 5th edition, it had 2 traits. The first is the Vile Transformation trait. Every day, one must succeed a DC 10 wisdom saving throw or gain a level of exhaustion. At 6 levels, instead of dying, they are transformed into a larva. And it also had the Despair trait. It's technically called the Shadowfell Despair because it's a trait that the Shadowfell also has, but the entry on Hades says to use the Shadowfell Despair trait for Hades. Basically, once per day, you have to succeed on a DC 10 wisdom saving throw or be affected by despair. There is a table that you roll on to get a random despair effect. If you're already suffering a despair effect, the new effect replaces the old one, and after each long rest, you can attempt to overcome this with a DC 15 wisdom saving throw. A Calm Emotion spell, or any spell that removes curses, will remove the despair. Locations. There are many portals in the first gloom, Oinos, that lead to Gehenna, Carcery, the Outlands, and the Astral Plane. All portals leaving look like great spinning coins, endlessly turning in the air. The portals leading to Gehenna are made of copper, Carcery gold, Outland silver, and Astral platinum. They are immune to the color leaching properties of the gray waste, and since everything else is gray, you can see them glittering for miles, and many creatures, such as Arcanoloths, build fortresses around them to control the traffic into and out of their domains. Plenty of roads wind around the waste, but none of them span more than a mile, as if the builders just gave up with the futility of it all. There are three main ways of traveling to each layer of Hades: Mount Olympus, the River Styx, and Yggdrasil. So the base of Mount Olympus reaches the third gloom, Pluton, near the gates to Hades' divine domain. Hades, the Greek god, not the plane. This is a common path since it bypasses the first two layers. You can climb down the slopes or make your way through the winding passages inside. However, the latter method is long and dangerous for someone who doesn't know where they're going. The River Styx flows only through the first layer, Oinos, in 2nd edition. In 3rd edition, it flows through the first layer, and smaller tributaries go into the deeper layers. The River Styx here is slow and calm most of the time, but occasionally gives way to sudden eddies and swirls. The base of Yggdrasil, the World Ash, resides at the base of a low hill in Niflheim. It is one of the few ways to reach Niflheim without first going through Oinos. Here dwells Nidhogg, a giant red dragon, and her innumerable brood. Her task is to gnaw at the roots of the World Ash and cut the link from Niflheim to Asgard, but the World Tree sets down new roots as she does this. There are two other notable locations on Hades that are not tied to a specific layer. The first are the Lodestones of Misery. These are great marble obelisks, 1,000 feet high, and carved with huge runes in a language no one alive can read. They are scattered across the plane, and there is at least one per layer, but there could be more. They are said to store the emotions and hopes that the plane drains from all who dwell in it. Occasionally, the runes flash red, racking anyone nearby with weakness and forcing them to relive their most miserable memory for days while they sob on the ground. Other times, it flashes blue and either restores life and purpose or steals it away from anyone nearby. And then you have the town at the center. So, the plane is divided into 3 layers, Oinos, Niflheim, and Pluton, and you go from the first gloom of Oinos to the second gloom Niflheim and then to the third gloom Pluton. However, there is a location where all 3 layers touch. There is a town called the Town at the Center that somewhat resists the apathy of the plane. It is divided into 3 sections, one for each layer it touches. The Oinos side is a disease-ridden slum where all the buildings are dilapidated and made out of whatever scrap could be accrued, and it's also quarantined off from the rest of the town. Those wishing to leave it to the other 2 sections must wait in a sterile gray cell for 1 day. The Niflheim sector is a rough pioneer town where everything is made out of wood. It is a working man's district with carpenters and other hard workers, a market, and taverns. The Pluton side is made of marble and granite buildings and the zone of the upper class with banks and wealthy merchants. The militia of the town are a mix of mortals and fiends. Yugoloths, Tanari, and Batazu, who deserted the Blood War, all serve but are not allowed to hold positions of authority. The town at the center is a great way to get around the layers without messing with Yggdrasil, Mount Olympus, or finding the barriers to the various layers. It also has a thriving market where you can find exotic things from the plane. There's no price for entry for passing through, so it makes one wonder if there's a spiritual price. Is there something that subtly drains those who pass through? There are dozens of other locations within Hades, and I will cover them on my videos on each layer. I'll do a video on Oinos, Niflheim, and Pluton, so keep a lookout for those. Inhabitants. So, the first native to Hades that we're going to talk about are the Petitioners. In case you don't know what a Petitioner is, basically in the D&D multiverse, when a mortal dies and their soul goes to the afterlife, that soul is called a Petitioner. In 1st edition, it seems to imply that all spirits who end up in Hades as their afterlife are soul larvae, meaning that there's no difference between a Petitioner in Hades and a soul larva, which I'll talk about larva in a second. In 2nd edition, Petitioners and soul larvae are 2 different things. The Petitioners of the Sad Plane are said to be lifeless and apathetic. They reveal no emotions on their face and are impossible to read because of it. Most resemble gray ghosts, spirits so depleted they lack solidity. They crowd any living being like moths to a candle, seeking the warmth of emotion and hope that lies within them. The petitioners obviously can take different forms in the realms of each god. For example, the petitioners of Urtris have no mouths. Hades is probably the worst afterlife to wind up in. See, the Nine Hells and Abyss are terrible places where you will no doubt endure pain, torment, and the threat of annihilation, but at least there's something to strive for. Devils can be promoted and rule over other devils, becoming the tyrants they wish to be in life. And demons, with enough smarts, strength, willpower, and confidence, can become more powerful and also assert their dominance over weaker demons. But the petitioners of Hades are stripped of their hopes and fears, waiting endlessly for something they will never have. The only fate that awaits them is being turned into larvae, which isn't much to hope for since larvae are pathetic creatures that are completely expendable. In 3rd edition, petitioners are described the exact same as they are in 2nd edition. In 5th edition, the petitioners who wind up here are instantly turned to larvae, going to Hades because they were unclaimed by the powers of the rest of the planes. So just like 1st edition and 5th edition, there's no difference between petitioners and larvae, they're the same thing. Now let's talk about soul larvae, because I've said that word like 50 times, and you might be wondering what they are. So these are the currency of the lower planes. They are gathered by night hags and branded to be sold or used in horrific experiments, and they are bought by liches, devils, demons, and Yugoloths as currency, food, spell components, sacrifices for arcane rituals, or to be turned into more fiends. They look like larvae. They're yellow, worm-like monsters around 5 to 6 feet long with a fat, sickly body. They ooze an odorous, viscous slime from their bodies that leaves a trail behind them like a slug, and they make a noise as they move that sounds like a vomiting dog. Their body is almost liquid in texture. Their head is the head of a deformed humanoid, vaguely resembling the face they had in life. According to 2nd edition, larvae are created from petitioners by night hags, from travelers who stayed in Hades too long and succumbed to its despair, or they are the souls of mortals that were so selfish and evil that when they died and their soul went to Hades, they skipped being a petitioner and were transformed directly into larvae. In 5th edition, larvae are formed either by neutral evil souls whose afterlife is Hades, or by travelers who stayed too long in Hades and got turned into larvae. They have no will of their own, and they lie in quivering masses, unless commanded by a greater power to attack. The lore for larvae in 1st, 3rd, and 5th edition doesn't go into nearly as much detail, but nothing in them is different or contradicts the lore from 2e, and the info we do get seems to be consistent with this. In 2nd edition, their bite attack would cause you to bleed 1 HP per round, and they would inflict a rotting disease, where you would develop a painful skin rot, and after 3 weeks, you would lose 4 HP a day unless you lie absolutely still, and then after 1 month, you would just die. And it could be cured with a cure disease spell. In 3rd edition, their attacks also bled 1 point per round, and they inflicted a disease called the Devil Chills, which was a fortitude save, and you would take 1d4 strength damage after 1d4 days, and then you would have to make a fortitude save every day, or take another 1d4 strength damage, and after 3 successful saves, you would fight off the disease. In 1st and 5th edition, they had no special attacks, abilities, or any sort of disease-inflicting bite. They just had a really, really weak bite attack. In fact, according to the 5th edition stat block, they actually have a 25% chance of dealing 0 damage on each of their bites. Hordlings. So, hordlings are the mindless armies of Hades, like the Lemirs of Beator or the Manes of the Abyss. Normally, people who stay in Hades too long succumb to apathy and despair. However, those that are able to avoid this by focusing on their hate or envy that brought them to the Grey Waste, instead become hordlings. Since each had their own hostilities, since every petty jealousy or deep-seated resentment has its own unique influence, each hordling is unique in their appearance and abilities. They vary widely in size and appearance. Some are large, some small, some humanoid, some animal-like, some amorphous, some have wings or tentacles. No two look exactly alike. In fact, in their entry in the Planescape Monstrous Compendium, they don't have just one stat block, but a bunch of tables you roll on to determine what they look like and what combat abilities they possess. They take their greatest pleasure in killing and devouring anyone that stands in their way, including other hordlings. There's really not much of a personality to speak of. Some are smart enough to outfox humans, and others are dumber than lemurs. The one similarity they all have is they can spot weakness and jump on it at the first given opportunity. They have no hordling language, and if you were to use telepathy or mind-reading powers, you would find their minds cluttered with persistent anger and burning hatred. They have no culture, and they produce nothing of value. Sometimes a Batazu or Tanari tries to press them into service in the Blood War, but they are harder to control than even the chaotic mindless mains, too undisciplined to be of any use, doing whatever they please. Now, all of this makes them seem very chaotic, even more chaotic than many demons. However, they aren't from the chaotic evil Abyss, but the neutral evil Hades, and in 2nd edition, which is where all this lore is from, their alignment is stated to be neutral evil. This confused me at first, but the way this was explained to me by All the Dragon on Ed Greenwood's Discord server is that they are uninvolved. They don't care about law versus chaos, about what philosophy the universe should follow, about the end result of the Blood War. They have no agendas or plans of their own. They just simply live, and that's it. That's what makes them neutral. Now, in 3rd and 4th edition, they are chaotic evil. This is because in 4th edition, they're just straight up a type of demon, and then in 3rd edition, there are 3 types of hordlings, one from Hades, one from Carcery, and one from Pandemonium, and a lot of them can also be found in the Abyss as well, so their chaotic alignment makes sense given how all over the place they are. Night Hags. Night Hags ride nightmares and gather up larvae to sell to whoever offers the best price. They do this specifically on Hades because the larvae here are neutral evil, so both Tanari and Batazu can buy them and make more of their kind. If they were to gather larvae from other planes, they'd be cutting off half their customer base. They also make larvae from petitioners using their unique powers. Some say Night Hags evolved from larvae, although that would mean larvae have hope, something to look forward to, so that can't be right. Some say Night Hags are the ultimate form of hordlings, and others posit that they are the petitioners of hags from the Prime. According to 5th edition, they were originally regular Fey hags, but were so evil and foul they were exiled to Hades long ago and are now fiends. Diakka. The diakka, or diak for singular, are avian creatures also native to Hades. Unlike hordlings, they are more organized and dislike erratic behavior. There are 2 types of diakka. In 1st edition, they were called Broad and Tall, but in 2nd edition, they were called Varath and Karsine. The broad, or Karsine, diakka resemble squat pelicans with human-like heads, have more HP, attack with their clawed arms, and are overall more powerful and intelligent. The tall, or Varath diakka resemble huge storks with human-like heads and attack with their long, sharp bills. They organize in flocks but have no respect for each other. They sometimes serve night hags, a relationship of mutual hatred, but both believing it is to their benefit. The diakka are too stupid to realize night hags don't keep allies for long, and they will most likely end up in her stew pot. According to 1st edition, their feathers are combinations of sickening hues that vary wildly, such as pea green and rusty red orange, or purple orange pink and dirty yellow all at once. This doesn't really make a whole lot of sense since everything in Hades is gray, but I guess if it gets summoned elsewhere, it might get its color back. They have their own language, but also speak, quote, the hateful tongue common to Hades, end quote. According to 1st edition. In 2nd edition, it says that they also speak their own language, and they speak the tongue of the night hags and other lower planar creatures. I assume this hateful tongue of Hades is just whatever night hags speak. However, I can't find any references to night hags having their own language, so I guess they just speak one of the fiendish languages. I'm not quite sure what that would be. In addition to those native creatures, there are a few other ones that can also be found on Hades. Because it is the main battleground of the Blood War, legions of devils, hordes of demons, and the mercenary armies of Yugoloths can all be found here, usually in the First Gloom Oinos, fighting an active battle, performing reconnaissance, or setting up bases of operations. Demodans, also known as Garrelets, occasionally come here and have skirmishes with the Yugoloths, who they hate. Baku Dark Ones frequent here to revel in the bloodshed or offer advice and power to one side. Baronoloths lair here in secluded places, offering advice and or secrets to Yugoloths who find them. Herds of nightmares are common here, and individual ones often serve night hags. And you can also find Achirai and Mephits in Hades, and Viper Trees specifically in Oinos. And that is the Grey Waste of Hades, the neutral evil plane. I will do a video on the 3 glooms of Hades in the future. So if you want more locations and lore in Hades, make sure to subscribe so that you'll see when I come out with those. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed.